picture this, okay? It's early November 2008.
Right.
The election has just been called, and I mean, the entire world is hyper-fixated on the formation of a new presidential cabinet.
Yeah, the history books are already being drafted at this point.
Exactly. But if you zoom in on this one specific neighborhood in Chicago, you'll see a completely surreal, almost absurd scene. There's a woman wearing a pulled-down baseball cap and dark sunglasses.
Oh, yeah.
And she is slipping out of this heavily armed, blockaded fortress with SWAT teams and barricades, a place that, just a week prior was her normal everyday house.
Which is just wild to think about.
Right. And she's trying to sneak a 7-year-old girl out through this massive security perimeter just to go to a public tennis lesson. And that woman, of course, is Michelle Obama. And this scene perfectly captures the mission of our deep dive today. We're looking way past the glossy historical symbolism of the Obama presidency. We're going to unpack the profound culture shock, the deeply personal private arguments, and the intense ingrained skepticism that really defined their transition from a regular Chicago family to the first family.
It's such a fascinating shift.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this, because that image of the baseball cap and the desperate escape to a tennis lesson, that does not sound like someone who is just thrilled to be packing her bags for Pennsylvania Avenue.
It absolutely doesn't, no. And if you want to truly understand the operational dynamic of the Obama presidency, you really have to look at the foundational tension operating right at the core of their marriage. It was a constant, almost exhausting pull between Barack's boundless political idealism and Michelle's intense distrust of the political machine itself. You have to realize the depth of this reluctance. Right after the election, Michelle actively and secretly mapped out a plan to just stay in Chicago with their daughters for the first 6 months of the presidency.
Wait, let me get this straight. The newly elected president was going to move into the White House, and the first lady was just going to stay behind in Hyde Park and commute to being the most famous woman in the world.
That was genuinely the plan she pitched.
Oh.
Yeah, she thought about letting the girls finish their school year in Chicago, maintaining their routine, while her mother, Marion, could help juggle the back and forth travel to D.C.
Oh, man.
I mean, it sounds completely unworkable in retrospect, given the gravitational pull of the White House, but it demonstrates how desperately she wanted to cling to a baseline of normalcy for her kids.
Right.
Ultimately, Barack completely vetoed the idea, and his reasoning was deeply personal. I mean, he had been commuting to politics since 1997.
Right. First to the state Senate in Springfield and then to Washington.
Exactly. He was living out of suitcases and hotels, and he was fundamentally exhausted by it. The presidency, ironically enough, was partly his promise that the family would finally be under one roof permanently.
That tension makes so much sense when you look at where they started. You've got these two brilliant minds who meet at the Sidley and Austin law firm in Chicago back in 1989.
Yeah.
And there is this stark contrast in their backgrounds. Barack was this worldly, highly driven loner. He grew up in Hawaii and Indonesia, raised partly by his grandparents, always sort of searching for a sense of rootedness and identity.
And Michelle was the complete opposite.
Right. She was the anchor. She had this sprawling, deeply connected, extended family on the south side of Chicago. She basically provided the stable, loving family life he had essentially craved his entire existence.
And that dynamic really became their operating system. While he broadened her horizons and pushed her to think globally, her background grounded him.
Yeah.
But that grounding also meant she had a front row seat to how messy and transactional reality could be, especially in Chicago. Early in her career, Michelle worked in the Chicago mayor's office under Richard M. Daley.
Okay, yeah.
And that experience deeply shaped her political skepticism. She didn't see sweeping idealism there. She saw local politics functioning as this closed-loop bartering system.
Right. It's not just the cliche of seeing the sausage being made.
No, not at all.
It's more like realizing the currency of the realm isn't money or even good ideas. It's favors. It's insider access and which zip code you represent.
Exactly.
She saw decisions being made based on who owed whom, rather than actually trying to solve foundational issues like systemic poverty or underfunded schools. So she walks into the political arena, sees this closed-loop system, and immediately distrusts it.
Oh, 100%.
But then Barack looks at the exact same broken system, and his takeaway is, I can fix this. I can elevate it.
Yeah, he had a profound, almost stubborn self-belief that the usual rules of corruption or moral compromise just didn't have to apply to him. He believed he could redefine the mechanics of the job from the inside out. But Michelle's skepticism wasn't just theoretical. It became deeply personal because she watched the machine chew him up early on.
Oh, you mean the 2000 race?
Yes. In 2000, Barack ran a horribly planned, overly ambitious campaign for Congress against Bobby Rush, who was an incumbent and a former Black Panther in Chicago.
Right.
And Rush absolutely crushed him. He painted Obama as this arrogant, overeducated outsider who wasn't authentic enough for the district.
And that loss wasn't just a bruised ego, right? From the sources, it caused a massive 2-year rift in their marriage. It broke them financially, and she felt he was acting egocentrically, putting his lofty ambitions way above their family's stability.
Yeah, it was a really dark period for them.
Which leads directly to the 2004 ultimatum.
Oh.
Barack wants to run for the U.S. Senate, and he basically makes a deal with Michelle. This will be his final campaign. Yeah. If he loses, he is done with politics forever.
That promise was literally the only condition under which she agreed to support the Senate run. In fact, at a family wedding in Hawaii 2 years later in 2006, Barack gave a speech where he openly admitted to the guests that careers, and especially the demands of raising children, can easily tear marriages apart.
He said this publicly.
Yeah. He was standing there, publicly acknowledging the immense strain his relentless ambitions had put on his own relationship, and how much his survival in the political world relied entirely on Michelle's resilience.
It totally reminds me of the classic one last job trope in heist movies.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You know, the safecracker promises his wife he's doing one final score, and then they're out of the game and moving to the suburbs for good.
Right, right.
But of course, the score goes better than anyone could have imagined. He wins the Senate seat, and then he delivers that lightning bolt keynote speech at the 2004 Democratic National Convention.
The one that changed everything.
Exactly. Suddenly, he's a national superstar. How do you analyze that pivot? Because from where I'm sitting, that massive runaway success essentially hijacked Michelle's dream of a normal, stable life.
Well, I wouldn't just call it a hijacking, because that implies she was entirely passive in the aftermath. What's fascinating here is the psychological coping mechanism she deployed as his national fame exploded.
Okay.
In those early years, her strategy was flat-out denial. She would literally tell reporters and the press, Barack is not a politician.
Wait, she actually said that?
She did. She actively tried to frame him as a community leader who just happened to be utilizing politics to enact social change.
Oh, I see.
But as his star rose and he became a cultural phenomenon, that grounded working-class skepticism you mentioned earlier became the necessary counterweight to his soaring ambition.
She became the ultimate reality check for a man who everyone else was suddenly treating like a political messiah.
Precisely. And that reality check was put to the ultimate test on Inauguration Day 2009. You move from the theoretical dread of political life into the physical, inescapable reality of it. You have this incredibly glamorous, historic moment there dancing at the balls, to Beyonce singing Etta James's At Last. You know, the world is celebrating this profound triumph.
Right.
But then the music stops, the cameras pack up, and they go home to a 132-room, 6-story mansion where they literally didn't even know how to find their own bedroom.
The disorientation had to be absolute.
Yeah.
And the physical constraints of that building are just wild. I think we take for granted what it means to be the president.
Oh, definitely.
Previous modern presidents had sprawling, remote private estates they could retreat to when they needed a break. Think of the Bush family's compound in Kennebunkport, or their ranch in Crawford, or Reagan's Tierra Dorada Ranch in California.
Yeah, wide open spaces.
Exactly. Those properties are massive, isolated, and incredibly easy for the Secret Service to secure with a wide perimeter. The Obamas didn't have that. They lived in a normal house on a busy street in Chicago with a public bus stop right out front.
Yeah, literally a bus stop.
So moving into the White House meant an immediate, jarring loss of physical autonomy.
The security apparatus essentially swallows you whole. The Secret Service is suddenly tracking their every single movement using codenames Renegade for Barack and Renaissance for Michelle.
Renegade and Renaissance, wow.
Right, and they had only one room in the residence with a secure landline phone. The internet was painfully slow because of security protocols, and there's a fascinating financial reality here, too.
What's that?
They live in this palace rent-free, but they are billed for all their own personal groceries and any private entertaining out of their own pockets.
It's like winning the ultimate lottery, only to realize your prize is living in a heavily guarded 18th century museum where you can't even crack open a window to get some fresh air, and a stranger unpacks your underwear.
That analogy captures the intense claustrophobia perfectly.
Right.
And that loss of physical freedom directly and immediately impacted their psychological state.
I can imagine.
Just 24 days into the presidency, the pressure was already so immense that they attempted to get away to Chicago for Valentine's Day. They just wanted to go to a restaurant, sleep in their own bed, and feel normal.
Yes, it didn't work.
It was a complete disaster.
Right, because you can't just go home when you're the president.
Exactly. The security footprint required to move the president into a dense urban neighborhood is staggering. The Secret Service had to physically alter their home, blocking out their windows with thick plastic tarps to prevent lines of sight for snipers.
That's insane.
The surrounding streets were totally locked down, infuriating their neighbors who couldn't get to their own houses. The Obamas couldn't even casually order takeout from their favorite spots. Navy stewards had to travel with them just to cook their meals. The trip completely shattered the illusion that they could ever go back.
Flying back to D.C. after that nightmare weekend, Michelle supposedly just looked at the situation and accepted the finality of it. She said, "We live in the White House now. The Chicago life, the walks to the park, it was gone forever."
Yeah, it was a heavy realization.
And this brings up an incredibly compelling tension. They finally have this ultimate security bubble, but the people securing and serving them inside that bubble represent a massive, uncomfortable historical irony. Let's talk about the social and racial dynamics inside the White House.
It's a central dynamic of their early transition. You have to picture the daily reality. There was a deep, palpable initial discomfort for the Obamas in being served hand and foot by an older, predominantly black staff of butlers, maids, and stewards in tuxedos.
Yeah.
There's a moment where Barack's close friend, Marty Nesbitt, is over for dinner, and he instinctively tries to clear his own plates from the table.
Because to Nesbitt and to the Obamas, these staff members weren't anonymous servants. They looked like their own parents and grandparents, the exact generation of blue-collar workers who had scrubbed floors and worked grueling shifts just to put people like Barack and Michelle through law school.
Exactly. The visual was jarring, and the historical weight of that building is staggering.
Yeah.
The White House was largely built by enslaved labor. Now, centuries later, it was housing the first Black first family who were being served by older Black Americans.
Wow.
The generational echo in that dynamic was profound. They were trying to navigate representing the future of the country while living in a building that constantly reminded them of its painful past. And navigating that environment brought out some incredible character moments, especially from Michelle's mother, Marion Robinson.
Marion Robinson might be the secret hero of this entire era.
She really might be.
She was deeply reluctant to move to Washington at all, eventually agreeing only to a 3-month trial.
Right.
And once she got there, she absolutely refused to conform to the imperial trappings of power. She wouldn't let the White House staff do her personal laundry. She famously rejected an interview request from Oprah Winfrey because she said she'd rather sneak out incognito and shop for bargain clothes at Filene's basement.
Oh, I love that detail.
Yeah. Here's where it gets really interesting. You have the most powerful building on Earth, designed to intimidate world leaders, and the most grounded, unimpressed voice inside it is a 73-year-old grandmother hiding from the press to go discount shopping.
It's amazing.
Think about how that working-class anchor must have affected the president's ego. And Michelle was doing it too. When she would visit Barack in the Oval Office and see him sitting behind the famous Resolute desk, the JFK desk, she wouldn't defer to the office. She would playfully scold him, saying, "What are you doing? Get up."
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. Did that constant puncturing of his status bruise his ego, or was it a survival mechanism?
Oh, it was absolutely a survival mechanism, and he desperately needed it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Michelle and Marion were deliberately puncturing what the White House staff called the Brad Pitt syndrome.
Right, where even massive celebrities would walk into the Oval Office and just freeze up.
Exactly. The Oval Office is architecturally and psychologically designed to project imperial power. Everyone who walks in there, foreign dignitaries, mega celebrities, even the president's own top brilliant advisors, is instantly deferential.
Why, they just clam up.
They agree with the president. They soften their bad news. Michelle and Marion were the only people on Earth allowed to treat the president of the United States like a normal human being who still had to pick up his own dirty socks.
That's so true.
They provided a crucial psychological tether to reality for a man whose daily existence had been stripped of all normal human friction.
And that friction is so necessary because the reality of governing from inside that bubble is terrifying. We go from the personal shock to the political shock. Barack Obama enters the White House as this hyper-connected modern guy glued to his BlackBerry.
Oh, yeah.
Suddenly, he's stripped of it. He is only allowed to read exactly 10 pre-selected emails from the public each day on this clunky, military-grade hacker-proof device. How does a leader even function when their information flow is completely bottlenecked like that?
That's the danger of the presidency. The office acts as a massive information funnel. By the time an issue reaches the Resolute desk, it has been sterilized, debated, and formatted into a sterile briefing document by dozens of staffers.
So all the context is just gone.
The raw, unpolished human emotion of a problem is entirely filtered out. Losing that BlackBerry wasn't just about losing a phone. It was about severing his finger from the pulse of the outside world.
Wow.
He was instantly isolated, making decisions of life and death and economic survival for millions entirely through the lens of his staff. Remember, he's immediately dealing with an economic collapse, signing orders to close Guantanamo Bay and authorizing drone strikes in Pakistan that unfortunately killed civilians, including children.
Right, those are immensely heavy realities.
Very heavy, and he has to process them in this bizarrely sanitized environment.
And the blending of that intense public pressure with his private life caused some real immediate friction. The Super Bowl party story illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, the Super Bowl party.
Obama just wants to have a small party with his friends to watch the Steelers. But his staff essentially hijacked the event, transforming a private living room gathering into a high-stakes political networking event.
Yeah.
They invited local politicians, bipartisan figures, and wounded veterans.
Yeah.
So you have Obama just sitting in the front row, intensely trying to watch a football game, while Michelle is understandably demanding to know why a bunch of political strangers are wandering around her private home.
It demonstrates the total collapse of their private boundaries.
Yeah.
The staff didn't see a home. They saw an opportunity for political optics.
Right.
And politically, Obama was hitting a massive, unyielding wall of reality. Consider the strategy of Republican leader Mitch McConnell during the early days of the administration.
Okay.
It was a brilliant, albeit ruthless, piece of psychological warfare. McConnell realized that Obama's entire political brand, his mandate from the voters, was built on being a bipartisan unifier. He was the guy who was going to transcend red and blue politics.
Right, there is no liberal America and conservative America guy.
Exactly. So by organizing a unified, absolute Republican blockade against Obama's $800 billion economic stimulus package, McConnell effectively robbed Obama of that core identity.
Because he needed them to play along.
Yes. If no Republicans vote for the bill, Obama fundamentally cannot be a unifier. Obama was genuinely stunned by this tactic. He was an idealist who believed a good argument would win the day, hitting the brick wall of Washington partisanship where the argument didn't matter, only the math did.
I keep hearing this framed as an idealist getting his heart broken, but, I have to push back a little here.
Sure.
Wasn't he also kind of a massive control freak? He flat out told his staff that he was a better speechwriter and a better political director than any of them. Was his massive, overwhelming early agenda tackling healthcare, the energy crisis, and the economic stimulus all at the exact same time? Was that the product of an idealist or the product of a control freak trying to direct, star in, and produce a movie all at once?
Well, I wouldn't call him a control freak in the traditional micromanaging sense. It's more that he was a systemic optimizer who suddenly realized he couldn't optimize his own environment. He believed completely in his own intellectual capabilities to solve multiple generational crises simultaneously.
Wow.
But as he struggled to juggle the collapsing economy, foreign policy, and domestic legislation, Michelle's role shifted dramatically. She evolved from a reluctant political spouse who hated the idea of Washington into his fiercest, most ruthless operational protector.
She stepped in to manage the machine because he wouldn't.
Exactly. She would listen to his wordy, deeply academic explanations of policies and demand that he speak plainly. "This is what people care about?" she'd tell him, cutting through the jargon.
Oh.
She saw that he was aging rapidly under the stress. She constantly worried that his staff wasn't protecting him enough from political fallout, pushing back against advisors who wanted to overwork him. Because she knew, perhaps better than anyone in that building, that as the first Black first family, they had absolutely zero margin for error.
None.
The historical judgment would be brutal if they failed.
Which perfectly explains the two-night rule. Even in the midst of global economic collapse and managing active military engagements, Obama mandated to his staff that he would only miss family dinner 2 nights a week.
Yeah, that was a hard line.
It wasn't just a scheduling preference. It was a hard boundary. to protect his sanity, his marriage, and his connection to the people who didn't care about his title.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean? When we look back at the beginning of this journey, it becomes clear that the Obamas' transition into the White House wasn't just a story about passing stimulus bills or navigating foreign policy. It was a daily, grueling battle to preserve their marriage, to protect their children's normalcy, and to maintain their connection to reality inside a machine that is fundamentally designed to isolate the people who run it.
Well said.
And for you listening, while you might never move into the Oval Office or have Secret Service code names, there's a deeply universal challenge here. You've likely faced a moment in your life where a massive change, a promotion that changed your friendships, a move to a new city, or a partner's skyrocketing ambition threatened to change who you fundamentally are. The struggle to hold on to your core identity when the entire structure of your life shifts is something we all navigate.
It is the ultimate human dilemma of success, and it leaves us with a profound, almost uncomfortable question to consider. The Obamas' relationship was originally forged by a shared identity as outsiders. They were community organizers, they were skeptics, they were actively fighting the system to make it better.
Right.
But what happens to that deeply forged bond the exact moment you become the system? Can you truly change the establishment from the inside, or does the immense isolating weight of the establishment ultimately change you?
That is the question, isn't it? It makes you look at that woman in the baseball cap and dark sunglasses, sneaking her daughter out to a public tennis court in a completely different light. She wasn't just escaping the press pool for an afternoon. She was trying to outrun the system before it